lying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Okay, maybe that might help. Hopefully. Let's see here. Okay. Now you guys should be able to hear me. Hopefully. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, there we go. I have no idea, but somehow my mic on my sound card got turned down. Okay, yeah, there we are. So, hopefully now I can play this clip and we shouldn't have any more issues. Miss the whole intro, but basically I wanted to go over the whole Ferguson fiasco going on out there and really try to hit all the points I can on it. And I was trying to say before I didn't realize I had audio. I was listening to Dana on the Blaze Network before this broadcast, and one of the few people I really have a lot of respect for out of the Blaze, for the libertarian values and the willingness to actually question and not demonize any side, did great coverage of the Bundy Ranch, which, when you looked at all the other programs on the Blaze, they kind of try to, in a way, demonize. They weren't really demonizing, but they were definitely discouraging support towards the Bundy Ranch. And whether it be intentional or not, that's how it came off to many, many people. And then, you looked at her coverage of it all and really had fair coverage. And tonight over the Ferguson really called out everybody on both sides that were doing wrong. Wasn't well, he was, he robbed the place, or potentially robbed the place. He could have been fighting. Can't blame the cop. He's never been in trouble. While there was a lot of calling out all of the sides, and I think that's very important, and that that's what you need to learn the truth, because if you want to live in a free society, you have to understand that aggression on either side, whether you have a shiny badge or not, is, not tolerated. But Adam Kokesh put out one, The Truth About Michael Brown Shooting and How to Prevent the Next One, and I'm going to play that right now.
We've seen another shooting of an unarmed black man by the police. The race of the officer, officially not released, but presumably.
Give me a second while I get this loaded.
Of an unarmed black man by the police. The race of the officer, officially not released, but presumably white. We see a white police chief in the town of Ferguson, Missouri, being the representative of the system where the population is 70% black. The latest story from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch Cleanup calm Monday morning after violent night in Ferguson. Editor's note, an earlier version of this story misstated part of St. Louis County Police Chief John Belmer's explanation of the shooting. Of course, a very touchy matter, a lot of spin on this issue one way or another, but some interesting lessons to be learned nonetheless. A calm dawn broke Monday morning after a night of protests and looting in Ferguson left broken glass in at least one burned-out building. Officer Brian Shellman of the St. Louis County Police said 2 officers were injured overnight Sunday. One was hit by a brick and one suffered knee injuries. Police arrested 32 people for theft, assault, or burglary. The protests followed the fatal shooting on Saturday of Michael Brown, 18, by police. Authorities said Sunday that a police officer shot Brown, who was unarmed, after the teen attacked the Ferguson officer. After protests and a vigil earlier in the day, some people broke into stores and looted them, setting fire to a quick trip and leaving glass and other debris strewn about. Now, the looting here is not really as interesting, except as a reaction here, as the shooting itself. And I really want to try to look at this from both sides of the story, because you have witnesses on the ground saying that he was running away, and from the evidence that we'll see, shot in the back, and the officer saying that he attacked him and pushed him into the squad car, and that one round was fired while he was still inside the squad car that didn't hit anyone, and that it was 8 shots that hit Michael Brown, and he and his friend were running away at the time. And I like to think that, I mean, the first thing is I hear the story unarmed man shot, and I have to think, okay, well, what instigated it? Because my first reaction is police don't go around shooting innocent people, and then I go, well, yeah, they do. But under what circumstances? What provokes? Do they really just go after random people? And I like to think back to the Vegas cop murders of a couple months ago, when the cops in question were actually part of an undercover unit, and the people doing the shooting were actually involved in a sort of narc sting setup. And so, were they killing innocent random cops, or were they killing cops that were, exercising some authority over them, or like bullying them, or basically threatening them with jail time for not cooperating and doing stuff, in a sense making the killers the victims in that case. But we know that cops lie all the time, and they get away with it all the time because the system protects them. So let's say, worst case scenario, they're like absolute, worst case in terms of Michael Brown's perspective. Let's say he was on bath salts. All right, let's say he was freaked out of his mind and violently assaulted a police officer and shoved him into his vehicle and was going for his gun. I mean, that's at least the worst version of the story from that perspective, although we're not hearing quite that, and still waiting for toxicology reports that we're not going to be able to trust anyways, because if the police say, oh yeah, we drew blood for Michael Brown and it turns out he was on meth and heroin and bath salts and blah, 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 okay, they're going to say whatever they want, and people around will be able to testify that it's not true, but what goes on the record, what goes before a judge, is more or less what the police say, because the legal system in this government-based violence is dependent on the police being able to lie and get away with stuff in order to keep the flow of criminals coming into the justice system, which is no such thing, but rather a legal system or a criminal punishment system rather than a justice system. So, I mean, let's say that even that's the case. Michael was shot running away from the police officer, and some are saying that the final shots were from some distance as he was running away, and that a friend of his who was with him right there during this incident ran and hid behind a vehicle and didn't get shot at all, but that Michael got shot because he stopped and put his hands up and was some distance away. Now, let's say that the case is really that bad, that there were these 2 young black men walked up to a police officer, shoved him into his car, there was some altercation, he was politely asking them for help, or who knows, or he was stopping them for littering and wanted to, write them a ticket, and they reacted violently and tried to run away. It's still not the right thing to do to kill someone over that. And the only reason that he gets away with it is because of the mentality of the cop who knows that he's not going to be held accountable, who knows that whatever he says isn't really going to be questioned. Even if there's overwhelming physical evidence that proves him wrong, in most cases the judge will say, well, maybe the way that evidence got to me is wrong, or I'm going to give the cop the benefit of the doubt in this case because he's an upstanding member of society. Even if he's just another thug in a blue uniform and is a career criminal who's just been getting away with all sorts of stuff. Even if he's got tons of complaints because the judges are actually biased. Yeah, surprise, surprise. So, I mean, let's see it from the other perspective, from that of Michael Brown. Let's say he was, maybe the cop was suspecting of some crime that he didn't commit or had nothing to do with. And he says, hey, would you stop, please? And he starts to run. And he simply gets shot in the back. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Because in either case, even if Michael Brown had made himself a violent threat to the officer moments before, shooting to kill when you could shoot to maim for someone who's running away or, according to witnesses, had his hands up in the street, it still doesn't justify the taking of a life. Now, I have an answer to this, as how to prevent this from happening. And when this happened, and I see this happening, Shellman, the officer involved here, said that looting and destruction stopped and the police helicopter was shot at once or twice but was not hit. He said the night was a scary situation even for veteran officers. Jennings School District canceled the first day of school today, saying it was concerned for student safety, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this goes on, and there's a lot to this looting and this violence. And the earlier story says a day of protests and vigils Sunday for an unarmed black teenager who was shot to death by a Ferguson police officer erupted Sunday night with confrontations, looting, and gunshots. And there are people saying that this will, and people in the community who are organizing legitimate protests, going to the police department saying, don't shoot us. This is the new protest. Is they're walking with their hands up saying, please don't shoot us, and chanting things like that. Pretty intense, and very emotional situation. And there are a lot of people who will then jump in and take advantage of it rather than out of legitimate anger and angst, go in and take this as an opportunity to loot. But I want to, again, try to see both sides. And if you think of this from the perspective of a property owner being robbed, then, it really sucks. Okay, so an innocent man got killed by a man in a blue costume who's being excused by the system, and now somebody else who's a relative or just happens to have the same skin color of him is now trying to steal my property as a store owner. Yeah, pretty fucked up, right? However, there might be a little more to this, and I don't want to excuse violence or force or theft in any way, but I just want to point out why a deeper understanding might be used to legitimize some of this looting. So think about this for a second. Let's say, you're a young black man in America who's been disadvantaged by the system, who understands that poverty is a racial thing in this country in many ways, who understands that the system in many ways is completely racist, despite we've got the first half-black president in America. There are serious racial problems in this country, and race is a major factor, and people are very much disadvantaged as a result of their race. And the way this happens is through the political system, and of course the legal system, the justice system, is incredibly biased. I mean, look at the drug war, look at the number of African Americans who are in jail compared to whites, and this is a simple feature of a system of arbitrary authority, is that it's going to amplify and provide excuses and mechanisms for biases to be produced. And I'm not I'm not using race to make the case here. There have been studies done that show that ugly people, if you're ugly and you go to court, you're more likely to go to jail than a good-looking person. Yeah, and you thought justice was blind in America. No, justice has her eyes open, and she is very, very biased in lots of ways. So if you're in this situation, you go, wow, How does the system exist? I don't pay taxes. I'm on welfare. I don't have a choice. Maybe I do, but whatever. I'm on welfare. I'm disadvantaged, or maybe I'm poor. My only opportunity in life is to deal drugs. And there are people that are holding me back, and they're the cops. And the cops aren't just killing innocent people on the streets of my town. The cops are enforcing this entire system. They're enforcing all of the laws that make this possible. And who's paying for them? The taxpayers, the store owners, the bigger property owners, the white people. And of course, it's not just that. And most people who are rioting aren't that blind, but they understand at some visceral level that the people with property, the people who are paying taxes, the people that are paying the salaries of the police officers who are treated well by this system when they are the downtrodden in this system, that they have something to do with their oppression. So you might think, oh, it's just, there's this angst, there's this disrupt, there's some angry protests, some people are taking it as an opportunity to loot and riot and blah, blah, blah. Well, there might be just a little bit more legitimate sentiment behind this. And there is a lot of misplaced angst. Like I said, I don't think there's any excuse for theft or violence in any of these situations. And that perspective actually is what holds the key to untangling this knot. I mean, you look at all of the people who are rioting in Missouri when you think, over one innocent black man killed, not to demean the tragedy in any way, but when there are so many more dying in black-on-black crime in Chicago or New York or Detroit or who knows where else, or just the millions of other people around the world who are under the threat of death from governments in Gaza, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. Oh God, I feel biased just even naming those few places, because there are so many others where people are facing systematic violence on a large scale because of government. And of course, you could name every place that the American military has had a presence. So yeah, there's a lot of misplaced perspective here. But at this point, especially when you see that 90+% of black Americans came out and voted for Barack Obama, who is now the oppressor-in-chief, who has kept the drug war going, who is overseeing this prison system where, there are more black people in jail than there were under slavery. I mean, it's like, it's maddening. It really is maddening. And what's sad, what's really, to me, and I hope that there are people who are in Missouri right now who might be rioting or looting or who are going to these protests, who are hearing this message of universal nonviolence and understanding how it applies to this situation and these circumstances. I want to say it's really sad that what you do in this situation, and it's helpless in a way, out of ignorance. And it's not because black people are ignorant. No, I mean, white people and people of every color around the world are just as ignorant to this. But you know what? And I'll tell you, when I was in jail in D.C., if anything, black people are probably more woken up to this already than white people in America. Because the well-protected citizens of the empire, those who are treated well by the system, are much more likely to stay asleep. But it seems out of ignorance only that people turn to the system that created this problem in order to fix it. That they are turning back to government to seek justice in a situation like this. And I'm not calling for vigilantism, although in some cases that may be the only way to get true justice. And isolating someone who has committed violence is justified and so much more effective than returning the violence, because retaliatory violence usually leads to some form of it continuing, spiraling out of control. And what I wanted to do when I heard this, when I saw this story and I heard people's reaction, and I heard the legitimate pain of the community, and I saw people on YouTube protesting passionately, and I saw people outside when they had the street roped off, and they were going and crying. I mean, I want everybody to understand why this happens. And it's because when you turn to the government for public safety, for police in the first place, when you think that you need government, a violent system of the tyranny of the majority at best, and in reality a tyranny of the string pullers, of the super rich, of the minority, it's really sad that people aren't able to free their minds to break out of this system and see that if you turn to a monopoly on violence to provide for the public safety, if you think that cops are necessary, and this is where I say black people in the United States are far more awake than most white people in understanding that government cops are not necessary. What do they do for real crimes? They show up afterwards and file a report. And when seconds count, they're just minutes away. And they have nothing to do with providing justice, but rather enforcing the will of politicians. I wanted to go and tell people there's a better way. And it's not through angst. And it's not through theft or looting or rioting or even violence toward the cops. But there's a growing movement of nonviolent resistance in America, of people who are deliberately checking out of the system, of people who are choosing to not support the violence of government, of people who are not paying taxes, of people who are ensuring that they educate their children with this awareness, of people who are sharing the message of freedom, people who care enough to understand that the problems we are facing will never be solved by the same way of thinking that created them. And you know that when that cop shot Michael Brown, whatever his color was, it really doesn't matter. It was because we have created a special class of citizens in America, cops, soldiers, government employees in general, but cops especially, when the rubber meets the road here in the streets of the United States of America. And that cop knows, if I ignore the tenets of justice, if I ignore my own conscience even, as long as I can say, I felt threatened, I can do whatever I want, I'm going to get away with it, guess what? They will. And they will again and again and again until we take away that systematic protection for those with a gun and a badge and a silly blue uniform. Because the limits of tyranny will be prescribed by the tolerance of the oppressed. And as long as we tolerate this system, these aberrations of violence that are all too common will continue to happen.
Adam Kokesh.
I can help us next.
And that was off of his YouTube channel. First off, distinguish between, retaliatory actions and defensive actions. If you are in a situation where your property, your family, your friends, your neighbors, when someone's life is in danger or their property is in danger, that is something that you have a right to defend yourself against. Retaliatory is if someone came and robbed you and you weren't able to protect your property, and then in return you go out and shoot the person. People, well, it's my property, he stole it, that's what he get. Well, you've already missed that opportunity. When your property is in your possession, that doesn't mean you don't have any recourse. But you don't have a right to shoot anybody because it's not an immediate threat. It's already been taken. They already have possession or have had possession and sold it or given away or whatever, that's when you have to come down to that legal action to be reimbursed your loss. And there's so many things that get missed when it comes to that. People think, well, we could go protest and then cause property damage and physical damage. That gives us a right to go hurt someone. That coming out of some of the radicals that showed up there from, again, out of the area, Chicago and all over. They came in and caused mayhem. A lot of the rioting where looting happened and everything was in part due to these outsiders. And I'm sure there was some peaceful protesters there that got caught up in the mix. Can't ever count that out. When you look at everything going on, it really did start out as a peaceful protest, which was met by police looking like soldiers. You have the media now actually calling that out, and it kind of frustrates me. Because, first off, let's look at it this way. That's actually local law enforcement. Peace officers. They are supposed to keep the peace. What they think they're doing is keeping the peace. What they're really doing is escalating the issue. Now let's look at the Bundy Ranch. BLM agents. These are not law enforcement. This is a bureaucratic agency. That's why they're BLM agents. They don't have law enforcement authority. And we didn't have the media calling them out for looking like military soldiers. You had law enforcement looking like soldiers. But that, I think, really, I'm not saying one's better than the other. But I think there's something to say when you have federal agencies and agents of those agencies looking like soldiers. And the media did not call that out. There was a lack of calling that out, but now you see mainstream media calling out, well, excessive force. Well, that's because, again, they're going to let it play into what they want. And most libertarians brought up the Bundy Ranch and brought up this. The problem is the mainstream media demonized the Bundy Ranch and try to justify agencies operating like military forces. Even Glenn Beck. Those militiamen, they had crosshairs on the BLM agents. Glenn, before all these militiamen just start pouring in, those agencies and the agents of the agencies, not law enforcement, not military, federal bureaucracies, agencies, had snipers sitting up on a hill with crosshairs on the Bundys and their local supporters, the neighbors that came out in support. That's why the militia showed up in the first place. Because they had pictures after pictures floating around showing these agents with sniper rifles pointed right at them. But all you, Glenn Beck, which I'm not going to say that you don't do any good. I think there's a lot of good things that have come out of the Blaze and what Glenn Beck's been doing. But on this, you'll call out the militias for showing up and putting crosshairs on a BLM agent without at the same time calling out the BLM agents for initiating this whole incident that end up causing militia to show up by putting their crosshairs on ranchers. On the local to support Bundy. So we that's another reason why I like Dana off of the Blaze, because she called things out like that, while others ignored those. But back to this Ferguson thing, you have these trooper-looking people show up, called law enforcement, peace officers. Yeah, you wonder why they're not called peace officers anymore. They show up like they're ready to go to Iraq. Yeah, they were shooting rubber bullets and tear gas canisters, but they were still causing harm. They escalated it. They did absolutely nothing to de-escalate it. Now you have the state police coming in and de-escalating it. But there's a problem that the people need to address. And that's why do you need others to come in to de-escalate yourselves and to kick out the troublemakers. Disassociate with the troublemakers. When you're out there doing your peaceful protests, don't forget to mention the troublemakers. Make sure that the media can't spin it that all the peaceful protesters turned into rioters overnight. Because we know that didn't happen. We know that mainstream media will always try to manipulate things like that. Give me a second here. We can't rely on government to call out issues like this. I'm not saying that, well, if there's this government that's supposed to be protecting the people, that they shouldn't take an initiative to bring peace without using violence themselves. But we shouldn't need them. How do you expect to take back your neighborhood from police that have these shiny badges and guns if you can't take it back from the rioters and looters? The ones that are not being peaceful protesters. The ones that are not out there for Brown. And I'm not saying that he was in the right. When it comes down to the actual case, the whole shooting, I don't know who's right. Things have kind of been withheld. I don't know if I trust the law enforcement there. Nor am I going to jump to a conclusion and make the assumption that the officer was at fault. It's just one of those things that I can't make that assumption. I'm not going to. And I'm going to play a little clip from Alex Jones. It's only like a minute. But you had all of these black community leaders come out. People like Al Sharpton. And, you know, the response from the people out there, I don't think he was too welcomed. Let me play you this clip and kind of give you a little understanding.
Where Al Sharpton at? Where Obama at?
Fuck Al Sharpton, he is sellout. That bitch wouldn't even get on the line and work with us.
Oh, fuck him then. Fuck him
He
then
wouldn't
too.
even come out here and work with us.
Fuck Al Sharpton. Fuck Al
Al
Sharpton.
Sharpton.
What about him?
Al
He wouldn't come out here with us.
Why not?
Oh,
Why not? Because he a trained monkey. He ain't shit. They tried to get him to come out here and control us. He wouldn't even do that. Fuck him.
You know where you
A little taste of their attitude towards Obama and Al Sharpton. And even the police chief called Obama out, and the protesters called Obama out. And he'll make a comment from way the hell away from there. And when you seen that Al Sharpton wasn't getting the best response. It wasn't terrible, but it definitely wasn't his best, show of support for him out there. He got shaky and ran. Al Sharpton, he didn't want to be around, and he had his bodyguards in. He definitely didn't look like he was too comfortable there. And it looked like he ran like a little rat, but, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe he had things to do. I don't know. Just how I feel about it, but it seems that, more people are aware that, well, most of these people are in it for themselves. They're not there for the community. They don't really feel loved by the community. And actually, I think it was the Blaze. Let me check. Have all kinds of stories open. I was reading, my head starts spinning. But yeah, this one out of the Blaze I've seen that. Minister who called out black community following Ferguson riots has a message for Al Sharpton. So let me pull this up here. Blaze and their ads makes their pages load so slow. But it says here, on Tuesday, Jonathan Gentry became an internet sensation when he went on rant against the black community following the riots in Ferguson, Missouri, and the shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown Friday. He doubled down in a passionate appearance on Fox News, calling out everyone from President Obama to the NAACP and Al Sharpton. I hate to say this, but I'm going to tell you what you need to hear as opposed to what you want to hear. Gentry, identified by Fox as a minister who is based in Los Angeles, said earlier in the week, all we know how to do is blame the police and blame white folks for our actions. That's all we know how to do is blame police and white folks. They mistreating us, he added in a mocking voice. They beating on us. Oh, slavery still exists. I'm sick of it. Which I think slavery does exist, just not in the racial form. It's more like a class race, and you have your elites at your top, your middlemen that do all the dirty work. Then on the lower end of the scale, you have kind of a two class in the, low end of the spectrum, where you have the complete poverty, and then you have your people that, well, they make some money, but really they're in a situation where if shit hit the fan, they'd be done in months. Really, a lot of people we think are rich, they're really not that rich when you really look at the full spectrum. You look at the people that hold the most amount of wealth in the world, and it puts you in a different mindset where you look at people that they make a good living. Not to say that they don't, but they really aren't rich compared to the overall picture. We are slaves whether we know it or not. I'm going to play this clip from Fox News. There's an ad. Let me skip it.
Prompting many to ask for peaceful protests, including our next guest. We told you about him yesterday, and you heard from him possibly online on your own. This has gone viral.
What we're doing out here is not helping. Change is not going to come until we change it. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to tell you what you need to hear imposing to what you want to hear. All we know how to do is blame the police and white folks for our actions. All we know how to do is march and riot and loot. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. I'm not going to tell you we going to march, we going to do this, we going to do that. I'm going to tell you, damn it, let's change.
Joining us now is that very man, Minister Jonathan Gentry. Jonathan, thanks for being with us. That is a 6 minutes packed with passion. Why did you want everyone to hear what you had to say?
It's a continual cycle. Thank you for having me. It's just a constant cycle. It's like we're just going around in circles year after year, decade after decade. Excuses, excuses, excuses is all we bring. Time and time again. It's just enough. Let's take responsibility for what we're doing out here.
What did you make of when Al Sharpton, the Reverend Al Sharpton, showed up to town? Because, you know, a lot of people said, "What, Reverend, why don't you go up to Chicago? There's killings every weekend in Chicago. You could bring the cameras to Chicago and talk about it there." Instead, they go into Ferguson. What was your response to him showing up?
Gilbert Arenas is absolutely right. Where were you in Chicago on 4th of July weekend when over 60 drive-by shootings took place? Where were you a couple weeks later when 47 shootings took place in Chicago? Where were you when that woman in Oakland lost both of her children 3 weeks apart? Where were you? You only come around when something happens with the police or Caucasians. You're not there for the black community, so you need to stop fronting NAACP as well. I want to call them out as well. They're good for nothing. All they do is perpetuate hate. I represent humanity. It's just from my heart. Humanity. God came for humanity. You know, enough with our excuses. And this came from, and let me say this, this came from the rebellion of the two gentlemen. Unfortunately, he lost his life. Understand, let's subtract race and police from the equation. If you two brothers would have just moved to the sidewalk like the officer said, we would not be here. If you would have just moved to the sidewalk and obeyed, we would not be here. 1 Samuel 15:23, rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. This went from stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Here we are, stage 5, total chaos.
Jonathan, you say that you have been pulled over a number of times in your car by an officer, and you say the way you handle it is how people should handle it. I listened to your entire rant. What's the difference here? You said we actually need to change. What if someone believes that they are being pulled over because of their race? How are they to handle that?
I've been pulled over. That's why I mentioned that. I've been pulled over many times. Many times. I have a brand new vehicle. I live in a valley. It's all customized. I've been pulled over. I know how to act when I'm pulled over. That's our problem. You picking on me because I'm black. What you doing that for? It just escalates. Humble yourself. The Bible says in Proverbs 15 verse 1, soft answer turns away wrath. Swallow your arrogance. Whatever that they got to do, whatever they put you over for, if you didn't do nothing, what's the problem? Well, that's our problem today. We're just so uptight about everything. It's sickening.
Right. Now, Jonathan, I can tell you're fed up. What kind of reaction have you gotten? I know you're getting a lot of views. What kind of feedback?
This is positive feedback. Of course, the black community, oh, you Uncle Tom, yada, yada. Honestly, the only Uncle Toms I see, and I want to say another word, are the ones burning down your own community. Sorry to say. Right. I'm not Al Sharpton. I'm not NAACP. I'm not going to go down there and say, we going to do this, we going to be okay. No. Let's change our ways.
What would you like to see from the President of the United States? A lot of people think, you know what, he might have missed an opportunity here to speak directly to the black community. What do you think that the President, here was the President speaking yesterday from Martha's Vineyard. I'm going to play this soundbite and get your response. Take a listen.
I know that emotions are raw right now in Ferguson, and there are certainly passionate differences about what has happened. There are going to be different accounts of how this tragedy occurred. There are going to be differences in terms of what needs to happen going forward. Now's the time for healing. Now's the time for peace and calm on the streets of Ferguson. Now is the time for an open and transparent process to see that justice is done.
Jonathan, your response to that?
Same old song and dance. We heard it from Trayvon Martin. You didn't say nothing in Chicago when it was a war zone where you came from. You didn't say anything about that. Why this? Why this is just PR, in my opinion.
And the Cambridge
someone handed him a note and said, "Speak."
Right.
It's hard for me to swallow.
Well, Jonathan, listen, everything you're saying, I hear it, I understand, but I'm just thinking about somebody at home right now and saying, well, Jonathan Gentry is giving in to the fact that there might be racial bias in this country, and you just said, well, there is, so deal with it and make the best of it. How do you stop the behavior you don't like, being pulled over because possibly you're black? Because you have the right answers is one thing, but the fact that you're pulled over, people say is unacceptable.
Your question is what? What's your question?
Question is, what do you say to people sitting at home saying, by answering the questions and getting along, identifying that you're pulled over because of race, and dealing with it is giving in?
The problem is, it's our reaction. It's how we respond. It's how we respond. You understand? Those two men, Mike Brown and his friend, challenged the police. He told you to move to the sidewalk. You said, no, we're going to wait till we get to our destination. That's our problem today as African-American males and African-Americans. We just feel like we're constantly challenged, so it's an ego thing. It's just a competition, and it doesn't help. Someone has to humble themselves. I just realize these officers are doing their job. I understand there are bad cops out there. Yes, I understand. But some of these gentlemen, officers, and my heart goes out to all of them, they have an extreme, stressful job. Let them do their job and be on your way. It just takes a couple minutes. Swallow your pride.
Sure.
That's the only way we're going to get ahead.
Jonathan, we want to thank you for being with us here. You know, certainly some will say that you had extreme statements with us this morning, but we thank you for being frank and honest.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Violence in Ferguson, Missouri.
Okay, now, you have him making a lot of sense there. A lot of sense. But we do have to do something about the law enforcement, the police officers. We need to address that because we have a conquered country from within, and we have plenty of cops that get away with murder, get away with theft. They get away with anything that they want to a point until, well, eventually you'll have a couple that they'll be thrown under the bus. You know, they serve as a fall guy to protect everybody else, and it's still a slap on the wrist for the most part. You have the rarities where, you know, they go to prison or, you know, they actually face justice, and I think those are even the more extreme rare cases. It's just, I don't know, it becomes idiotic that we have allowed law enforcement to get to this point. And I see a post here, Free Thought Project from, it's on Facebook. Jim Funky and Nathan Frazier both posted it on Facebook. I'm going to share it on Anti-Tyranny News.com's Facebook page. Give me a second here. It's cop mistakes daughter for burglar. Shoots her, crashed its car, taking her to the hospital. Said, Deputy Easton McDonald of London County, Virginia, shot his 16-year-old daughter this week as she attempted to re-enter their home after sneaking out for the evening. The deputy claims that he thought his daughter was an intruder because she tripped an alarm system that was attempting to sneak back in through the garage. McDonald told investigating officers that after hearing the noises in the garage, he grabbed his gun and began firing blindly into the dark because he believed that someone was coming at him. According to his story, which right there, I was firing blindly into the dark because I believed someone was coming at me. Meaning he didn't see anything. He had a feeling. According to his story, when he turned on the lights, McDonald saw his daughter laying on the ground shot, so he dialed 911, told them that he would be taking her to the emergency room. Unfortunately, McDonald crashed the car while on his way to the hospital, and the girl had to be transported the rest of the way by emergency crews who responded to the crash. A series of bad decisions made the deputy on this night is leaving many to speculate as to whether or not he may have been drunk. I'm going to play this clip here. Once this commercial's over. But this article is at thefreethoughtproject.com. And I shared it on Anti-Tyranny.com's Facebook page. And here's the clips here I play.
Well, 16-year-old girl is in stable condition after investigators say she was accidentally shot by her own father. WHAG's Maris Babcock spoke with deputies at the Frederick County, Virginia Sheriff's Office and brings us the story.
Many buy guns to protect themselves against crime, but for one father, a split decision to use his gun backfired after he accidentally shot his 16-year-old daughter.
Male subject stated my daughter's been shot and I'm taking her to the hospital. There was an open line for a few seconds and then the phone disconnected.
Investigators say the confusion happened in the 400 block of Lily's Way around 3:30 in the morning on Tuesday when the girl's father was getting ready for work.
He has an alarm system inside that what I call is audible, that it tells you what door is being opened.
His alarm system, another safety precaution, told him that the garage had just been opened.
He heard some banging and rustling around in the garage. At that particular point, he obtained a firearm that he had there in the kitchen area.
The rustling wasn't an intruder, but his teenage daughter.
Later on, it was determined that the daughter had snuck out hours earlier that morning and was attempting to sneak back into the home.
Lack of visibility and the feeling that someone was coming at him led the dad to fire the gun, hitting his daughter in her torso. Within moments, he realized his mistake and rushed her to the Winchester Medical Center. But in the hurry and chaos, the father accidentally wrecked his car at Cork Street and East Lane in Winchester. Winchester Fire and Rescue were able to safely transport the girl the rest of the way there, where she remains in stable condition.
We'll be confirmed with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, reference all the facts, and once it's completed, to determine how they wish for us to go further.
Reporting in Winchester, Maris Babcock, WHAG News.
And you know, one thing I've noticed, I don't know if the training is that much different. I don't know what the cause, but it seems like cops are being trained to shoot quickly. They don't seem to be trained to hold back, even with their tasers. There's just way too much pulling of a taser or a firearm. You know, we've dealt with criminals in the past. people that have stolen, people that have killed, people that have robbed, and even rape. But when it comes to a lot of these victimless crimes, other than racism, a lot of these abuses didn't take place. They grab you and throw you around a little bit, throw you in the cop car or whatever, and harass you a little bit. But you didn't usually have 8-10 cops jumping on top of you, hitting you, beating you. Again, we did have a lot of the racism back in the day that did contribute to all that down in the South and other places. But it seems like instead of freeing every race to be equal, we've separated classes. It's no longer racism, it's classism. And a lot of these people truly think they are better, smarter, and worth more than the rest of the population. That's evident when they have Secret Service, bodyguards. Well, we need the protection because we're important people. Why? Why are you important people? Because you've made yourselves important people and you've propagandized your importance. You've brainwashed your importance into society. But when you really get down to it, how are you more important than the next person? If you look at how many people run for president a year, even if you toss in independents and write-ins and third parties and all of it, does that really represent how many people could do just as good a job, if not better, than the next person? The people that have been elected? A lot of people would argue there's a lot of people out there that could do better. And then there's a lot of libertarians out there that understand that although you may be able to do better, as long as that position is fantasized and filled and society accepts it, that people will never truly be free. Now, that's definitely later down the road and far cry from what we have now. And constitutionalism is definitely a giant leap towards freedom, but it is not true freedom. But if we could get back to state rights, local communities working together, there could be a difference. But did you notice something in those the clips I played of these Ferguson protesters pretty mad at Obama? Well, there is a main issue right there. Right there is where one of the biggest issues. One, you supported Obama, which he was a sellout, and everybody knew it. Well, not everybody, because people voted for him. But it was soon learned. But that you didn't focus on your local level. all those people in Ferguson that probably went out and voted for Obama would have focused on their local sheriff, their county and city government, and really put a grassroots, liberty-loving person up there, you wouldn't be having these problems. Stop voting on the national level. It's a fraud. It'll never work. But if you get grassroots organizations and, independent, liberty-loving people, freedom-loving people that don't operate on race. I love freedom for black people. No. I love freedom for no. I love freedom for no. I love freedom for everyone. Yes. When someone has that grasp on what freedom is and understands to have freedom, you have to have all-out freedom. And that doesn't mean people can harm other people. That's not freedom. That's abridging people's freedom. Well, if you have all-out freedom, people no, that's not freedom. That's someone infringing on someone else's freedom. It relies on the non-aggression principle. It relies on volunteer interactions with people. You can't be forced into it. You don't have to do business with someone you don't want to. When you pick and choose who you'll do business with, that's a form of anarchy. That's a form of freedom. But when you get to a point where you don't want to do business with any of these people that are in existence, providing that service, and they make it too difficult for you to start up a better business model, when they make it almost impossible for you to find other people because, well, there's a monopoly. It's a regulated monopoly, but it's a monopoly. And they'll always have excuse after excuse for why they must do it this way. But it's all based on fallacies, and we have to release that hold on that cognitive dissonance that society seems to have. Okay. Give me a second here. Okay. Give me a second here. Couldn't seem to find what I was looking for. Should be right here. But it's not. Maybe I passed it. Give me a second. Darn it. I had it open. I must have closed it, but There it is. Okay. And this one's out of Next News Network. And it's Texas strengthens Border Patrol. One thing going on down in Texas, they're doing it pretty hardcore. They're really going after, beefing up the border. Again, something Ron Paul's warned of, other people have warned of, and I've warned you of it. You build the wall, you build the fence, it will be used against you. When the federal government is blatantly harming its own citizens, it seems, tools that they create will be used against those same people. And when they say that Tea Partyists are terrorists, that returning vets are terrorists, that, people that like Ron Paul, when they make these type of people that adhere to the non-aggression principle, are considered bad people by the state. These fences will be used against you. These walls will be used against you. But I'm going to play this clip here.
There are now extra eyes on the nation's southern border. The first wave of National Guard troops called up by Texas Governor Rick Perry are now manning observation posts along the Texas-Mexico border. A Texas National Guard spokesman says that dozens of soldiers are being deployed in the Rio Grande Valley. Soldiers are there to report any suspicious activity and to defend against any so-called narco-terrorists. Doctors and health officials in Africa have vastly underestimated the scale of the Ebola outbreak. That's according to the United Nations top health agency, the World Health Organization. Leaders fear the contagious disease might actually be worse than they first reported. Already, more than 1,000 people have died and another 2,000 are infected with the virus. The death toll keeps rising as Ebola keeps spreading in Nigeria. Even with the renewed concerns, Doctors Without Borders says in 6 months, this all should be over. The president of the organization is calling for the WHO to send top international medical experts to the plague-stricken region of West Africa. Nigeria isn't just fighting Ebola, they're also battling with the Islamic State regime, Boko Haram. Nigeria is much more religiously diverse than Iraq or Syria. Boko Haram is the fiercest group of fighters in the country. Now a group of the Sunni faction sees several dozen boys from a remote village. Officials expect the boys will be trained to fight for the terrorists. The militants burned down several houses and made off with almost 100 victims. Now that Boko Haram is losing popularity and volunteer recruits across Africa, they are turning against the civilians and taking them as captives. Just earlier this year, the Islamic fighters abducted over 200 schoolgirls to sell them as sex slaves. Pakistan is just wrapping up their Independence Day celebration right as they ramp up their protest against rigged elections. Demonstrators turned violent overnight in Islamabad as thousands of angry rioters marched in the streets, waving flags and shouting. The deputy leader in the area says police did not intervene with the clashes. The breakout riots come just one day after Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif announced a new investigation into last year's election. For the first time in 5 nights, the Ferguson protests were peaceful last night. The crowd of angry, tired demonstrators cheered loudly when state police replaced the local authorities on the street, this time without gas masks and riot gear. The changing of the guard and the changing of the gear seemed to be a big step in the right direction. Now, instead of focusing on the heavily armed police presence, the conversation turns back to the original issue, the shooting death of teenager Michael Brown. In Chicago, hundreds of people showed up to a vigil in Brown's honor. In Los Angeles, protesters marched right down Broadway Avenue. Crowds even gathered on the steps of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., calling for a Police Accountability Act. And today, the nation learns the name of Michael Brown's killer. A new health warning from the federal government. You might remember Dr. Rima Leibau joining us on our show last week. She told us that she has a cure for Ebola. Now, the Food and Drug Administration is telling people not to be lured into buying any treatment online that claims to prevent a disease that is causing the crisis in Africa. The FDA says websites are popping up claiming to have drugs for sale that can prevent or treat Ebola. The FDA says there are no tested or approved vaccines or drugs that are ready to fight the deadly disease. There are experimental treatments that are under development and have been given to the 2 American missionaries admitted to an Atlanta hospital. But those drugs are not available to the public and they cannot be bought online. What's being sold online, the FDA says, is bogus. Speaking of drugs, it's a state of emergency in New Hampshire. Governor Maggie Hassan issues the emergency alert today, giving state and local police the green light to search and seize the drug known as spice. Manchester police are reporting almost 10 per day, already over 44 overdoses in that city since Monday. Concord police are reporting at least 3 more cases in just the last 24 hours. Some convenience stores are selling spice on their shelves with the label Smacked. It's a chemically engineered synthetic drug, but yet the wrappers often say all natural. The gay marriage battle is flaring up in Virginia today. Same-sex couples could soon be walking down the aisle in the Commonwealth. That's only if the Supreme Court decides not to strike down a circuit court ruling that allows gay marriages in the state. Opponents of same-sex marriage are hoping for an emergency delay from the High Court. If the bench does not intervene, Virginia will have to recognize out-of-state gay marriages by next Wednesday.
I'll tell you what, this world just seems to be turning upside down. There's just absolutely no accountability. We have it in a society where we create big corporations. And that's just a normal thing to do. Somehow it's supposed to make everything better. It does not. It actually gives these people protection. Couldn't they be going after these companies for false advertising? All natural. No, it's synthetic. And it's killing people. The war is going on. We are in an upside down world. And the people running this show all over the world are the one that are turning this world upside down. And my question always is, are enough people going to wake up, not only here in the United States, but worldwide? Are we going to finally start correcting the mistakes of history? Or are we going to go down the same path over and over like we have? One thing is there are a lot of people that have woken up to the idea of actual freedom. A lot of people. But the other problem is, there's also a lot more people that have fallen asleep. The percentage, I don't know if our percentage is going to be high enough. hopefully the internet has freed more people's minds than I realize. Because something has to give. Because society just cannot operate this way for much longer. And, you know, we have this anti-bullying going on. We can't allow people to bully. Which, it'll always start attacking your free speech. Well, you said that and it offended someone, therefore you can't say it no more. I can find someone that's offended by almost anything anybody says. You'll always find someone that's offended. Therefore, if they can go, well, by him saying that's bullying me, and it offends me, well, can't say it no more. What kind of society does that create? Well, Time Magazine put out a article, bullying is good for your health. And Adam Kokesh covered this. It's a pretty quick clip, so I think I might play that. If it'll load. Yep, it's going to load. Cool. It's something that we haven't really addressed when you see all these anti-bullying campaigns and stuff. People are like, yeah, people shouldn't bully. Yeah, people shouldn't bully. But I'm not willing to start a anti-bullying campaign that eventually will, abridge people's right to free speech. It's a counterproductive thing. And then, there's a lot of us that get bullied, and I think that others should be able to stand up for the ones that are getting bullied. And there's ways to help people, and I think a lot of it has to do with our humanity. It's not shutting other people up. It's having our own humanity to step in between, to show others love and compassion, especially when they're the victims. Well, here's this clip.
Time.com, Time Magazine, in their health and psychology section, bullying is good for your health. A new study in PNAS that investigates the long-lasting physical effects of
have to reload. I don't know why YouTube keeps doing this. But
from Time.com, Time Magazine, in their health and psychology section, bullying is good for your health. A new study in PNAS that investigates the long-lasting physical effects of bullying on both victims and their aggressors finds that bullies show lower levels of inflammation, which is linked to higher risks of chronic diseases like cancer or heart trouble. There's no denying that being a victim of bullying can leave lasting psychological and social scars. Victims are more likely to experience depression, anxiety, and problems in developing healthy social connections for years after the experience. But according to a new study, it gets even worse. The people bullying them may actually experience health benefits from their ruthless behavior. William Copeland, an associate professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Duke University Medical Center, and other researchers report in the journal PNAS that bullies show lower levels of inflammation, a biological process linked to higher risks of chronic diseases such as heart trouble and cancer, while victims show spikes in the very inflammatory markers that could prime them for serious health problems. The results aren't an excuse for bullying, says Copeland, but serve as a lesson for how social status can have lasting positive effects on health as long as it doesn't come at the price of hurting others. So you would think that this would then lead to some other explanation, that they would say, well, there's something else you can do. And instead they're equating this to social status, which seems a little disturbing, when you would think that they might want to look at other ways of reducing inflammation instead of a sort of proxy for bullying of social status, which of course can be positive and in a sense a certain benefit to the individual, but to a society that has elevated and depressed social status. And I'm not trying to say, oh yes, everybody should be equal and everything should be fair, blah blah blah, but that having people have a sense of dominance over others in a social setting is in a sense very much the same thing as bullying, at least obviously as they're saying psychologically. Copeland and his colleagues took advantage of a database involving 1,420 children who were followed from the age of 9 to 21 and who were tested at 9 different times during that period. They were asked about their bullying experiences, and researchers took their blood to measure things like C-reactive protein, a marker for inflammation that is important for a predictor of heart disease, among other ailments. Victims of bullying show the greatest increases in their CRP levels compared to where they started, which wasn't surprising since inflammation can spike due to stress, anxiety, and lack of sleep, all of which bullying victims experience. So this is at this point, we're thinking like, okay, this is all pretty predictable, right? If you're a bully and you feel a need to bully others, that is to threaten them, to coerce them, to violently abuse them, to steal from them, emotionally abuse, whatever the case may be, getting that is going to have a positive physiological effect, that there's some payoff for that, there's some psychological gratification, and that you're exercising control and power over others, and in doing so, it gives you all sorts of positive feelings in terms of domination. And that if you're the victim of that, yeah, you're going to feel bad. Yeah, if you're subject to violence, you're going to be stressed out. So this is, again, at this point, not very surprising. The more often victims were bullied, the more their CRP levels rose, but the real shocker came when the scientists analyzed the CRP levels of the bullies. Their inflammation rates were lower even in those children who had never reported being bullied or being a bully. Bullying seemed to protect the aggressors from inflammatory diseases. Quote, we found that the enhanced social status that came along with being a bully did seem to advantage them over time. That finding, more than anything else, surprised us. But does it really give you an advantage to be a bully? And this is one of the interesting ways that humanity is evolving from perhaps a state of nature when whoever could pick up the biggest rock was in charge, to today when it's not obviously that, but who can be the best liar, the most convincing leader. But there's a more positive way of describing this, that it used to be the big alpha male who was in charge, who could throw their weight around, who could be the leader, and now you look at who's like really successful. I don't mean just like the politicians, but you look at like corporate executives or CEOs or entrepreneurs who are able to bring people together. That is now the most important skill in the way that humanity has evolved and where we are today in society. And you could say that that's an evolutionary thing. You could say that that's a technological conditions have changed thing that has produced a different criteria for success. But either way, this is not what it used to be. The fact that there are physical benefits to being the top dog socially and that these effects are long-lasting is an important message of the study. And it's not just bullying. Other research has linked higher socioeconomic status to lower levels of inflammation. But what distinguishes Copeland's work is the long consequence of this effect, which extended from childhood into young adulthood. It shows the possibility of social interactions for positively affecting a person's health. It's striking that we can still detect that effect down the road. But I have to insert a big but here, and I don't know, maybe the researchers aren't looking into this in this particular study, and they're seeing the possibilities for this. But socioeconomic status, or being the top dog socially, are things that you don't need to bully for anymore. At least you don't have to, and there are better ways. And if you think about it, it really makes sense that if you found those things through non-aggression, that you'd be at an even lower level of stress and inflammation, and that you would be like, as a bully, if you're dependent on violence or abusing others, there's a certain fear and a stress that that's going to come back to you, or that you're pissing people off, and that they're going to come back to you. Clearly, there are ways to enhance your social status without threatening to pound your peers. Copeland hopes the study serves as an endorsement of more positive ways of promoting self-esteem and confidence through athletics, extracurricular activities, and other experiences that can help people feel good about themselves and that don't come at the expense of others. Bullying shouldn't be its own reward. And I mean, maybe it's just a shallow article. Maybe that's all we're getting out of time at this point. But I would hope that they're not just trying to, be provocative with this, because there really is a more clear answer and a much deeper understanding here that that really is an important takeaway from this very legitimate, scientific, very straightforward observation about the effects of bullying and how they can support someone's health. But if you're and what I would hope is that they had teased out something a little more nuanced, because when they said that this was people who never reported being bullied or being a bully, they're looking at the entire spectrum of children in their sample, as opposed to separating those who are socially successful or academically successful, or I guess in some way as a kid economically successful, although I suppose that's not really relevant. Maybe being in an economically successful home environment where you have financial comfort, you don't have any stress from that. That there would be, you would hope that they would want to separate those and show that, hey, if you're able to self-actualize and be at that level of success where you don't have these stressors, and that you're able to control your environment and get what it is that people get out of bullying without the bullying part, that they would be able to show that that's an even better strategy for lowering inflammation than from being a bully. Because for being a bully, it's like if it's stress, anxiety, lack of sleep, bullying victims, what bullying victims experience, then you have to think, what causes bullying? And if bullying is a way for people to react to their conditioning, their environment, to take charge of a situation, what is it that leads them to do that? It's not complicated. Like, we know in the way that children are raised what it is that leads to their bullying. So if a child is bullied by their parents, or they see that behavior, then they're going to emulate that. If they have the self-esteem problems that come with that, they're more likely to emulate that behavior. So a kid who's beaten down by his parents and is getting that stress at home is then going to turn around and beat their peers in the schoolyard. This is nothing new. So if that's how this is happening, you would think that being a bully would only be helpful in response to that. Like, that if you're getting that kind of stress at home, that being able to project that stress in the schoolyard, being able to abuse others, then gives you a sort of release or relief. Like, if you're at home and you feel like at home, as opposed to in a healthy, loving environment, your parents are nurturing and loving and encouraging and caring, and empowering, and you feel like you control and your needs are met, then you're not going to go out and bully, but you also don't have this need then to control others. Whereas if at home you're being bullied by your parents, you're being beaten down, then you feel out of control, you feel stress. So, like this, am I a bully or a victim of bullying? Well, if you're a bully, you're probably also at some level a victim of bullying. I mean, you have to be at some level. And really, in the world today, at least in America today, every child is a victim of bullying, because that's exactly what government does. I mean, government, by any definition of bullying, government is the biggest bully in the world. But it's particularly destructive for children going to government schools who on a daily basis understand the threat of, well, it's the government that is requiring me to go to this institution, and if I don't sit in cemetery row seating and listen to a lecture from someone and repeat what I'm being told and blah, 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 and fill in the bubbles and pass the test, then my life is going to be a failure. So everybody in America, especially as a child in government-run schools, is a victim of bullying, and that's going to lead them to bully others. But if you wanted to really look at how to get a better takeaway from this, it would be to see that there's a problem that bullies have that bullying releases. And this is, again, you see the study, and it's really just a confirmation of stuff that we already know from psychology, in that when people are bullied, they become bullies. So they are getting a certain kind of release. If you feel like you're out of control in your home environment, and then you bully other kids, and you're able to control other people in that environment, then you're relieved because, like, oh, I'm in control again. So if you take away that original stressor, then you take away the need in a child's mind to bully in the first place. To say that, like, bullying has a healthy effect, the headline here, again, provocative, fine, bullying is good for your health. That's like saying heroin is good for your mood, or cocaine is good for your energy levels. It's like, yeah, and, maybe there's something else going on here.
And I can agree with them on that. And there is some breaking news. Let me pull it up here. This one is out of Nashville, I guess. I got this link because I seen someone on Facebook post Ron Paul for governor of Texas. And I'm like, Ron Paul running for governor? What? And I click on the link. Breaking news. Fox 17 out of Nashville. Texas Governor Rick Perry indicted for abuse of power. Texas Governor Rick Perry has been indicted for abuse of power after carrying out a threat to veto funding for state public corruption prosecutors. The Republican governor is accused of abusing his official powers by publicly promising to veto $7.5 million to the state public integrity unit at the Travis County District Attorney's Office. He was indicted by an Austin grand jury Friday. Perry said he'd veto the funding if the district attorney, Rosemary Lemberg, didn't resign. Lemberg had recently been convicted of drunken driving. The state's public integrity unit operates out of her office. When Lemberg refused, Perry carried out his veto, drawing an ethics complaint. Perry is the first Texas governor indicted in nearly a century. He's leaving office in January, but he's a possible 2016 presidential run. And I doubt it now. And I did see another one here. If I can find it. Okay, just let it load here. Maybe. This one's out of KXAN. Not sure where that's out of. But not going to play the clip. We don't have enough time. But to add to it, in this, it says, a grand jury was called to determine whether or not Perry broke the law when he threatened to veto the funding. As a result, the issued indictments on 2 felony charges, abuse of official capacity and coercion of public servant. If found guilty of the charges, Perry could be sentenced to a maximum of 109 years in prison, which I doubt that'll happen, but probably get a slap on the wrist. But yeah, a maximum of 109 years in prison for what? they're accusing him of doing. Again, he's been indicted, but he's not been found guilty, so not going to jump to conclusion, but it definitely sounds like he was withholding funding on a department for one person's resignation. It says here, shortly after the indictment was announced, Gilberto Hinojosa, president of the Texas Democratic Party, released a statement calling the governor to step down. We call on Governor Perry to immediately step down from office, he said. Texas deserves real leadership, and this is unbecoming of our governor. Last time this happened, according to Associated Press, the indictment is the first of its kind since 1917 when Governor James P.A. Ferguson was indicted on charges stemming from his veto of state funding to the University of Texas in an effort to unseat faculty and staff members he objected to. Ferguson was eventually impeached, then resigned before being convicted, allowing his wife, Marin M.A. Ferguson, to take over the governorship. And then there was another one. That one was indicted, but was acquitted, and that was Hutchinson in 1993. And yeah, so if you go to KXAN.com and go to the article, Texas Governor Rick Perry indicted by grand jury, and they have the indictment there, has the docket number and all that. You can go ahead there and read that. Hey, no one person posted about Ron Paul for governor. Hey, there was a big grassroots thing in Texas, and everybody wrote him in, even if he didn't decide to run, but just wrote him in. Even if it's something that is a burden to Ron Paul, would that not just make it better? Because if it's a burden on him, he's going to take it seriously. I think his years in Congress were a burden on him because he knew he couldn't get anything done. He's a pretty smart man, and I think governorship, he could make a lot of change there. Hey, it's an idea, but I don't want to feel pooper on the thing, but I hope to see actual change, but sometimes I wonder if there's enough people out there that are willing to change, to take that initiative to change. And like I say all the time, you have to change yourself. You have to change the way you carry yourself. You have to address your own flaws. And that doesn't mean that you're going to not make not have flaws, not make mistakes. It's that you're willing to address those mistakes. And I think that's a big problem, is the whole addressing. There was one thing I was going to cover, and I ended up closing out the articles, but I've seen about 3 articles, and they're coming out of local news affiliates, and I guess it's a social media thing going on right now where if you've seen trailers or heard of the movies Purge, where for 12 hours. The government allows all crimes to be illegal for that 12 hours, and people have to lock themselves in their homes and defend themselves, and chaos. Well, apparently there's threats I've seen in Louisville, Kentucky, and Jacksonville, Florida. That was the two I can remember off the top of my head, but there was, I think, another one. Flyers have been handed out. There's been social media buzz about a purge actually happening. And even if, you don't believe that, the law enforcement there is taking it serious. So you might want to have a camera handy if you're in Louisville or Jacksonville. Louisville, Kentucky, Jacksonville, Florida. Because you might see a heavy police presence, and apparently they're definitely taking it serious. And I know at least the Louisville one, there was flyers going around town everywhere, social media buzz about it, and basically, I think it was tonight, 8:30 or something, the purge will start, or something like that. But definitely a warning to people out there. There might be some nutsos out there, and you might have the cops acting like nutsos because of the threat. Either way, you'll want to stay safe if you're traveling around. Make sure you got your camera phone handy. Definitely, if you see a lot of police presence or people acting like fools out in the street, they might actually be dangerous. And just keep safe. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay tuned here on ECY.TV for great broadcasts coming up after this. Take care and have a great weekend.